My question is, how do people who make videos and wear glasses record without their lights reflecting off of the lenses? Because the answer to that question eludes me. The overwhelming consensus seems to be just don't wear them, but they're too dang cute, so we're gonna keep them on. So today I wanted to talk about stuff. That's what I wanted to talk about. So what I want to talk about today is the dictionary definition of feminism. Should we use it? Should we not use it? Is it adequate? Let's discuss. As someone who discusses feminism, social justice, the like on the internet, I often run into conversations with people who don't necessarily share the same ideological leanings as I do. But I find that a lot of problems that arise when I am talking to someone who is politically opposite or, just shares a differing opinion with me is that we're using different definitions for the same word. And this comes up a lot, for example, in discussions of racism, where we're using two different definitions of the word racism. They're using the dictionary definition of racism, which usually is along the lines of being prejudiced or discriminating against someone based solely on race. Where I use a sociological definition that I personally find to be a lot more in-depth. It usually takes into consideration power dynamics and the legal history of race and the way that race has been classified and societal systems and things like that. So it's not just isolating racism to be a person-to-person encounter where, anyone can be equally discriminated against based on race, because I think that definition is really simplistic, and I think if we're going to discuss a sociological concept, it makes more sense to use a sociological definition. So that's an example where I think that the basic Merriam-Webster dictionary definition is not the most useful in certain conversations because it's always going to be very simplified. It's going to be like 1 to 2 sentences max, and it can't possibly get into the core of the issue because that's not really what it's meant to do. Dictionary definitions are meant to give you a very basic, rough idea of what a word means, but if you want to have a more in-depth discussion and a better understanding of that word, then it's better to use different sources and more in-depth specified texts. Like if I'm trying to learn about biology, for example, and I need to learn a specific term, I wouldn't look in Merriam-Webster to get the most in-depth definition of that word. I would look in a biology textbook because that's going to be more useful and there's going to be more nuance to that. And I will admit that I have been a person in the past who, when I've been having conversations with anti-feminists or people who just don't necessarily identify or agree with every aspect of feminism, I've said the dictionary definition of feminism is someone who fights for equality. So if you're not a feminist, then you must not believe in gender equality. Which, looking back, I realize is not the most helpful argument to make, and in the end, neither person has come to a better understanding or has really been swayed either way. And on top of that, I've met a lot of self-identified feminists who I just adamantly disagree with. In the past, I might even say that they're not real feminists because I don't believe that they're doing feminism correctly or whatever that means, but usually I use that as shorthand to mean that I don't think that they are as informed or as familiar with a wide variety of feminist theorists to get like a full picture of what intersectionality and intersectional feminism should look like. But I really don't know if I believe that that's the best way to go about tackling people I disagree with who identify as feminists, or even people that don't identify as feminists and want to talk about like the definition of feminism. Because there are multiple types of feminisms, and it's not one monolith where everyone agrees on everything. I'm not sure if I find the dictionary definition of feminism as someone fighting for social, political, and economic equality as being specific enough. I don't know if I find it super useful because pretty much any person ever is going to say that they're for equality, but we could have very different ideas of how to achieve equality, and we could disagree. We could be on completely different sides of the political spectrum and, say that we're for equality. So I feel like using a broad definition like that might be helpful to an extent, but I don't know if I personally find it useful anymore the way that I might have found it useful in the past. I think it might be more helpful to use more specific definitions and more specific terms when we're having conversations like this, because a lot of the time I might agree with someone, but the way that we're using definitions leads to fundamental disagreement and confusion and miscommunication because we're trying to articulate the same idea, but we're doing it in completely different ways. And then the conversation just doesn't go anywhere because so much time is spent saying, well, what do you mean when you say the word racism or sexism? And what do you mean when you use this word? And then it becomes all about defining things instead of like actually communicating ideas. And I find it frustrating, but I also don't necessarily know if I have a solution to this problem. I think maybe it's just important to be precise in our language and hold ourselves to a higher standard when we're using words with very specific meanings. And I know I'm not perfect with this, but I think it's just something that I've been thinking about a lot. And it's something that I want to keep in mind more when I have discussions in the future. This has been rambly and unscripted, but it's kind of what I've been enjoying making lately, so you're just gonna have to deal with it, I guess. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are on this, because I'm curious how you fall on the whole issue of, do you use the simplistic definition of feminism as simply being for gender equality, or do you think a more specific term, like identifying specifically as an intersectional feminist rather than basic ass feminist, is important? Because there are people who identify as feminists who don't believe that trans women deserve rights or that they're real women. And there are feminists who don't care about women of color or issues of racism and believe that we should only talk about gender issues and ignore any racial issues that might intersect for women of color. And obviously I disagree with that, and I think my ideological beliefs are very different from those perspectives. But if we only use the definition of feminism for fighting for equality, then it's not very useful. So maybe we need to be more specific in what type of feminist we are, or, you know, what type of feminist theory we're discussing. I don't know. I feel like most feminists probably aren't going to watch this video, so maybe it's just me talking to myself, but that's okay, because it's something that I've been really interested in, have been thinking about a lot, and I'm still not really sure how I feel about it. So sometimes it's helpful to just vomit my ideas at a camera and get some feedback from you guys. So that's where we're at right now. My cat is walking across the screen right now, so I think it's probably time to go. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this one. Also, this is completely voluntary, but if you would like to help support this channel and Feminist Fridays, then please consider donating to my Patreon page, which will be linked below.